Are you trying to force a neurotypical kink dynamic onto an ADHD or autistic brain? Yeah, that's a recipe for disaster. I'm Alessandra from Dom Living, and today I'm sharing why kink needs to be customizable and how to actually do it when you're neurodivergent. Welcome to the Dom Living podcast. Have you ever felt like the normal way of doing kink just wasn't designed for you? Like everyone else got the manual and you're just trying to survive the social stuff, the sensory overload, the pressure to be perfect at your role. If you've ever felt that way, you're not broken. You might just be neurodivergent. And guess what? You're not alone. Today, we're diving into how ADHD, autism, and other forms of neurodivergence show up in the kink community and how you can build a BDSM dynamic that actually fits your brain, your body, and your needs. I'll be sharing some personal stories too because I'm actually neurodivergent. So, a while ago, I actually did an episode all about BDSM and mental health, and I shared how I have OCD and I shared a bunch of my symptoms and everything I have going on. I have been diagnosed with having obsessive compulsive disorder. But the interesting thing was, someone in the comments said that a lot of my symptoms sounded more like autism, and that as a female, I was probably just trying to do the masking thing that autistic people do. And I shared that comment with my Dom, and I thought that it was interesting. And he actually reminded me, he said, well, I thought you said when you were 18 that a psychiatrist actually said that you were on the spectrum and that you had a lot of those symptoms and that you probably did have, some autism in you. And I had totally forgotten that when he brought it up, but I was like, oh yeah, I do kind of remember that, how I did have a doctor who said that I was probably on the spectrum. And I brought it up later with my mother, and she said, oh yeah, like I remember when you were little and you were like this and this and this, and shared all these, stories about me. But so that's what I have going on. So again, diagnosed OCD and have had a psychiatrist say that I am probably on the spectrum. So also my Dom, he deals with ADHD. So we have that form of neurodivergence in our family. And a huge portion of my clients, students, and kinky friends are somewhere on the neurodivergent spectrum too. And once you start noticing it and how many people have it, you kind of can't unsee it. Neurodivergent folks are everywhere in the kink community, and today we're going to talk about why that is, the unique challenges that come with it, and most importantly, how you can create a dynamic that makes you feel empowered, not exhausted. And definitely stay through this whole episode because I'm going to share specific scripts and scene ideas designed for neurodivergent minds that you can literally steal and use today. But first, let's talk about the big question. Is there actually a link between neurodivergence and BDSM? And the short answer is absolutely. While I'm not a doctor and there aren't a ton of formal studies yet, but in the research that we do have, and honestly, just from being in the community, it's clear that people who have ADHD, people that have autism, people with sensory processing differences, OCD, trauma backgrounds, like you name it, we are heavily overrepresented in kink spaces. So you may be wondering, well, why is that? But the reason is because kink offers structure in a chaotic world, that you have things like contracts and rituals and rules, and the real world, the vanilla world, is so unscripted and chaotic and can be so not routine. And so BDSM offers a way to have that routine. And then another reason is Kink offers sensory stimulation that is chosen instead of being overwhelming. We get to choose and have hard and soft limits about the different sensations that we experience. And we also have the power to stop it with safe words and things like that, things we can't really do in the vanilla world. So there's a lot of appeal. And then another reason is kink offers clear roles and rules, and these things feel safer than having to go through life just really guessing social norms and having to try to fit in and read people. We also thrive on predictability and structure, and again, there's just so much of that in BDSM. Because have you ever noticed how much easier it feels when someone tells you exactly what's expected? You don't have to guess. Well, that's not you being weird. That's just you being wired differently and finally getting a roadmap to make it easier. I know for me, when I first started living a DS dynamic, I really didn't realize how much I craved the predictability of it. Rituals like kneeling, service tasks, even verbal protocols, they didn't feel restrictive, they felt like relief. And then meanwhile, my Dom with his ADHD, he really thrived in this lifestyle because kink gave him a place to focus, to hyperfixate, and to really just channel his energy without judgment. Even one of my clients with ADHD told me it's like kink gives them a script when their brain would, otherwise be spinning in 20 different directions. So kink just really makes it so much easier and predictable for them. Now, in a minute, I'll walk you through why some dynamics actually can trigger shutdowns and meltdowns if you're neurodivergent and how to work around those and how to avoid it. But first, let's talk about the challenges neurodivergent people face in kink. So, if kink is so great for neurodivergent people, why is it sometimes so hard? Well, because most kink education, most ideal roles are still designed around neurotypical brains. So, we may deal with some common neurotypical struggles like masking, like I mentioned before. So, this is where you're pretending you're not overstimulated, you're pretending you're not exhausted or anxious in a scene because you don't want to, maybe ruin the mood. I know I've done this where I'm more concerned about how I'm appearing to other people, whether or not people are accepting me. So, unfortunately, in the past, I have just gone along with things because I was more concerned with appearances than what I was really needing in that moment. Another common struggle is sensory overload. So, impact scenes with loud music, flashing lights, strong smells. So, for many autistic kinksters, that's an instant shutdown. I know when we go to a dungeon and there's just so many people there, there's loud music, sometimes there's flashing lights. It can be very, very triggering, and sometimes when we come home from a dungeon, like, I spend the next couple days pretty much in hibernation in my room trying to recover. And then another struggle is executive dysfunction. So, this is being expected to perform or initiate tasks or rituals when you literally cannot move because your brain is like stuck. This sometimes happens to my Dom because he has ADHD, where sometimes he's just given so many choices and so many things he can do because he's the Dom and gets to call the shots. But then it's almost like an overload and it's like paralysis by analysis. So that's something that people can struggle with as well. And then there's also miscommunication. So, different processing speeds or communication styles can lead to confusion or hurt feelings. And believe me, when you have someone like me who has OCD and autistic tendencies, and then you have a partner who has ADHD, this can happen a lot where we're just kind of not on the same page with our expectations and communication. So we really have to work at it. But one of the biggest struggles neurodivergent Kinksters face is burnout. So something like scene drop, it isn't just emotional, it's literally neurological. Um, for example, I once tried a heavy impact scene at a dungeon with just super loud music, and within 10 minutes, I was just completely disassociated. And again, it just took me days to really feel like myself again. So it wasn't about the pain. I mean, I could take it. I'm a huge masochist, but it was more about the noise and the lighting and just the unpredictable chaos that was just all around me that was affecting me more than this hardcore scene that we were doing. So if you struggle with any of this, I'll just kind of give you a practical example that one of my students was able to do. They created this really beautiful color coded system for their safe wording and feeling burnt out and overwhelmed. So they made a bracelet with different colored beads because when they shut down, they couldn't really verbalize, maybe their safe words were like red or yellow. So instead, they can just kind of point to a color on their bracelet. So that's always something you can try too. And later on, I'm actually going to share one of the biggest hacks I've seen for navigating aftercare when you're neurodivergent. And it's so simple, but so effective. So stick around. But we have to talk about something a little uncomfortable first, and that is ableism in kink spaces. Even in communities that pride themselves on consent and communication, neurodivergent and disabled kinksters a lot of times face bias and discrimination even. People assume you're too complicated to have a scene with, or that you're even a safety hazard. You can even be dismissed if you need scripts, accommodations, or slower communication. And this isn't even just between individual players, this can be in even full dungeons discriminating too. And then there's just the pressure to perform high protocol or high energy dynamics that aren't really accessible to a lot of us. Again, there's events that don't offer sensory friendly environments or quiet spaces. I will say there is one dungeon here in LA I really like. So I'm super, privileged to be able to go to this dungeon. They do have a quiet room for aftercare. So, or even if you're just overstimulated, you can, go to this room. So I love that our local dungeon has that. But I can't tell you how many times I've heard people say, if you need that many adjustments, maybe you just aren't cut out for this lifestyle. But, I'm sorry, that kind of thinking is garbage. Neurodivergence isn't a failure, it's just a different operating system, just like iPhone and Android. And if anything, kink should be the most customizable, inclusive space out there in the world. So, if you've ever been made to feel like your brain or your body have disqualified you from serious kink, you're not alone and you are not the problem. So, we are going to break down practical ways to customize your dynamic, all the way from protocols to play scenes to aftercare, so it actually supports your neurodivergence. Because I want you to be able to thrive in kink as a neurodivergent person, or if you have partners who are neurodivergent, how to be able to help them. So, here are some communication hacks. So, one thing you can do is use written negotiation checklists. And so, we have a ton of these on our site at domsubliving.com. You can get checklists, contracts, it's all there for you. But sometimes just having something written, I know this helps me so much. It's also gotten me out of a lot of punishments too, because I will be a brat and be like, well, we didn't write it down, so I don't remember it. So, just having all of these things written can really just help to cover the bases when you have a hard time processing different things. And if you're more of a visual kind of learner, you can do visual scene planning boards too. I know a lot of DOMs like to keep journals where they can even draw out a scene, taking something like their bedroom or a dungeon space and kind of just drawing out how they want to do it can help too. You can use those color-coded safe word systems, like red, yellow, green, or even having something like the bracelet, like I mentioned earlier. And if you're in a long distance relationship or you're just texting with your partner, you can even use something like emojis or different number codes for checking in with each other. Just as another example, I've heard of one couple using a like 1 to 5 hand signal system during scenes when verbalizing for them has just become really hard. So they can just, put up, whatever number on their hand, like a 2, if they're doing okay. And that has helped them. And then there's scene and protocol customizations you can do. So build low sensory scenes. So things like softer impact, gentler music. You can dim the lights even to make things more, not as stimulating. You can create visual ritual charts for daily DS interaction. So we've done this where we've had calendars and stickers, and that's just been so helpful for me. You can do different tasks as kind of grounding tools if you have ADHD. So, one thing my Dom really likes to do is do a daily meditation practice, and that just really helps him to stay focused and centered. And also, daily exercising too can be really helpful. I even have a wind down ritual with my Dom that involves like 5 minutes of silent cuddling after scenes because verbal processing right after impact is too much for me. I will freak out a lot of times. And we don't even rush into touch either. He kind of has to test the waters with me to see how I'm feeling, but we kind of just have this mutual agreement that the first 5 minutes after a scene is just really, really quiet, no stimulation. And it's just been so helpful for both of us to kind of just re enter our bodies and process just what happened before we're able to converse with each other about what we need. So definitely pre-plan your aftercare, including what sensory needs you have. Maybe it can be things like weighted blankets, soft snacks that you need. Maybe you have that no talking, rule if that's something you need. One student I worked with, had even laminated cards that they would hand their Dom if they couldn't really talk after a scene, and it just kind of listed all their different aftercare needs without having that pressure. So all of this really takes some mindset shifts, and that's kind of an understatement, but you have to learn that needing structure doesn't make you less submissive, it doesn't make you less dominant or less of a kinkster, it's just makes you different. And you have to learn too that sensory sensitivity doesn't mean you're fragile. It's just information to help you be a better dom or sub or switch. And there's also the fact that slower processing doesn't mean you're bad at negotiation. It just means you need time or you just need a different way of doing things like writing it down or having more visuals. We actually have a child, one of our sons, and he has ADHD, and we've just told him that this is your superpower and you just learn a little differently. And at the end of this episode, even, I'm going to share a journaling question that completely changed how I viewed my neurodivergence and my kink identity. So definitely stick around for that. But neurodivergence isn't something you have to fix before you deserve a fulfilling, powerful, kinky life. Your brain, it's not too complicated for kink, and your needs aren't too much. The world and this lifestyle that you're building, it can absolutely be adjusted to honor who you are. And if you want neurodivergent friendly tools, templates, and checklists to support your journey or your partners, grab my free BDSM resource library at domsubliving.com/free. I'll put a link for it in the description too. But here's the journaling question, I promise. So the question I like to journal about is, if my brain's way of working was a superpower in my kink life, what would that superpower be? And a lot of times my answer will change over time. But leave a comment below if you're neurodivergent or if your partner is, and let me know how you're working on building a dynamic that fits your needs. But thank you for being here. You belong here. And until next time, keep embracing your power and pleasure through Dom Sub Living.